Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo!
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for you guys to hear from our very next guest. I have virtually in front of me Ryan Turner. He is also a registered dietitian and podcast host, and he also helps people heal their relationship with food and find balance in their eating habits. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit more focused towards men, but for the ladies who listen, which is a majority of my listeners, don't turn off because you're going to still learn a lot and you could probably help the men in your life. So thank you so much for tuning in. And Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much, Tony. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So first question, always I ask my guests. It's a 3-part question. I would love for you to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, it's always a fun question to answer, right? Because this is kind of how you get to know someone right away, before getting into the fine details. But I was just thinking, how do I define myself really quick? I love like quick points. And I was like, if someone had to know this right away, dietitian, business owner, and most importantly, in my mind, is just being a father. That last part there, I think being a father has helped in both those first two areas so much. I have a 5.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And they create so much challenge and so many amazing moments. And it just pushes me even harder as a dietitian and a business owner to just kind of keep learning. Beyond that, I've been a dietitian now for, I don't even know, when did I become a dietitian? Maybe around 2013, maybe. But it was a kind of a change of careers for me, and jumped into this, went back to school for it, which has been fun. I spent some time as the resident sports dietitian over for NYU Athletics. And now I am director of sports nutrition over at a great training facility in Manhattan, as well as kind of running my own business, Food is Fuel NYC, where I really see, clients one-on-one, providing as much support as I can, just really kind of stemming from a lot of where my story comes from. It's kind of why I do now what I do now. So, just being an educator, a creator, I'm definitely someone now who is kind of a reformed runner turned, very focused on strength training from a, just a personal aesthetic standpoint and just from a health standpoint. So all this together is just kind of who I am today. So
I love it. And what made you get into being a dietitian?
As I mentioned, being a dietitian was kind of a change of careers, or, your first job out of college. Is that really a career? I was working in healthcare consulting down in DC, in a really great company. And we were looking into best practices, hospital best practices. And I remember kind of looking at it and thinking like one area no one is ever touching on. Like we would talk about best practices in nursing and even philanthropy, just like cardiology, all that kind of stuff, like how to run your hospital like the best hospitals in the country. But there was never anything that was like more proactive. Everything just seemed reactive, just like it would clinically in a hospital as you're working. I was like, why is no one looking at nutrition? I remember I looked into it, like, how can we look into this? And I kind of saw there's no money there because it's just, that's how things are. And so that kind of just piqued my interest. And, I've always been an athlete. I played soccer and lacrosse. I've always been like a great runner, like running has come easy to me. And so nutrition's always kind of played a role. So I wouldn't say that there was this like complete aha moment, but a lot of things kind of brought me to kind of going back to school to become a dietitian. And then, as strange as it is, I think that a lot of what I kind of went into it and thinking into my past, I was like, oh, I think I'm a dietitian even more so because of what I really went through as a child. And so, did one come before the other? Maybe, I don't know. Did one open up kind of a thought process of the other? Definitely. And so, doing what I do today, I think where I kind of come from is One, wanting to help people, but help people that were definitely in my position. I was an athlete. I loved, opening up like men's health as like a young kid, and like, they would highlight like a certain nutrient here or there, like vitamin or mineral. And, I think we know how like all those, popular culture magazines kind of pose nutrition as, and kind of, the evils of them, and, some of the good things that can come from it. But I was always interested in kind of like that stuff versus like comic books and all that kind of stuff too. And, always wanted to get stronger, always wanted to, I wanted that six pack as I was kind of growing up. I was always a really good athlete, but I was always like that second place athlete, I felt like. And the type of things that I would try to do, like take those supplements that I was hearing about, or, just like doing like thousands of sit-ups to try and get a six pack. But looking back on things, a lot of what I wasn't doing were the simple things. Like I knew that, I really wasn't lifting. I just kept running and running and running, which definitely helped. But, I wasn't really doing anything that was, developing my body more from like a resistance standpoint, but also from a nutrition standpoint. My growing up, I wasn't really able to set myself up for success. I think just kind of how my family dynamic was in terms of, eating in a structured way, like always having the right kind of foods around. And I guess just fast forward to kind of where I am now, I kind of want to help those people who just feel a little bit lost and don't know what to do. And it really brings me to specific, kind of clients I work with today, very active individuals who kind of have their head in a swivel, don't know how to answer the questions of like, what should I be eating? Or I feel like I've kind of like plateaued in my training. My performance isn't where I want it to be. I'm finding myself being irritable. My health is kind of declining. Why? Like just having all these questions and not knowing how to answer them is why I want to be there. Because I think when it comes down to it, I always think nutrition is a little bit easier than we make it out to be. And if we can, bring someone back to, I guess I try to work off of the theory of Occam's razor, right? Like the simplest answer being the answer, because it tends to be like, okay, let me hear everything that's going on and let me help you organize it, and let me help you really put into context what you're doing, what your body might require. And I'm going to help you close those gaps and do it in, a very practical way that is going to work for you. And if you have a family, it's going to work for you and the family. But something that, is going to get you to where you want to be, whether it's short-term, long-term, whatever it's going to be. But I want you to make sure you don't have the answers sitting, or I don't want to make sure you don't have the questions sitting in your head of how am I going to do this?
Right. It's fascinating that like nutrition and eating, it's a basic need. And yet a lot of humans don't even know how to just fuel themselves. It's actually crazy when you really think about it. Like you don't really have to teach any other mammal on the planet how to eat, what to eat, right? Like they just instinctually know, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's, I always talk about having that sweet spot of nutrition and how people do need to relearn, also just learn some things too. I try and find that sweet spot. And Tony, I know I'm kind of speaking, preaching to the choir here, but, like I want to find that balance for people of, the middle of three things. Overall satiety, satisfaction, and biological need. And I think that we can focus in on one of those at certain points, certain periods of our life, certain periods of our year, our month, our week, whatever, if we want to, help ourselves out. Sometimes we want to focus more on pleasure if we're walking into, a Michelin star restaurant, right? And, we want to like taste this food. Like we probably need to let go of certain things like the satiety aspect and the biological need. But if we have certain goals like performance, we do need to focus on biological need a little bit more than maybe just focusing completely on the satisfaction and the pleasure of things, right? So I'm always trying to walk someone through all of that and how to make it all okay, because there's no wrong or right there, but it's all, what's working for you, right? You have to do you in the end. But if it's not going to support your health, your mindset, and your overall, goal, then, are you doing right by you? You have to do you, however it's going to work. But let's get there together.
Yeah, I really love that. We're saying the same thing. We want you to find balance, and we're both helping people to break up with the all or nothing mentality, but actually really love how you broke it down into those three different, almost what we call them like pillars. So just repeat them for a second. You said your biological need. to repeat
satiety.
them for people.
Yeah. So satisfaction, satiety, and biological need. And usually, if I am talking with someone and they end up finding themselves in some of these like really hard areas, like if someone is going to be in a position where, I'm actually just checking back my notes as I always kind of like rethink through these things. But like I was thinking like someone focusing on more satisfaction and biological need, like that's where and short-term results, just like someone who is only focusing on satiety or like what I kind of call structure, the pacification of food, and they're just focusing on biological need, that tends to be where we find our binge eaters. There's someone who is just like, they're constantly tracking their food, but they're never enjoying anything, right? And so that's where we start to see those problems. And just like someone who like hasn't ever focused on biological need, they don't really, they haven't ever thought about what their energy needs are or how much protein they might need, right? If, we can learn that and then place it appropriately for our mindset. But if we haven't ever done that or we're against doing it, that's where I think I find people's health declining a little bit more. We see them at body compositions that maybe they're not so happy with. So it's just in my own, I guess my personal life, my professional life, but also just like, the evidence-based areas here too. That's kind of what I've boiled everything down to. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's such a great way to kind of break it down for people. And you brought up binge eating. Some might, I actually just recently posted something that I thought was such a great explanation on your Instagram about like, you can call it stress eating. Some people call it binge eating. We know that binge eating disorder is very different than just having periods of binging or emotional eating. But I would love for you to kind of talk about how like low energy availability can result in binge eating. You also mentioned that it could be like, just only eating for the nutrient quality and not actually eating for flavor or pleasure. That could also lead to binge eating. But how could like not getting enough calories also lead to binge eating?
Sure. So, I think not getting enough is a very broad kind of topic, right? So, if we're talking specifically about something like low energy availability, we are talking about someone likely not getting enough calories for overall biological, physiological need. And that is going to come around when we take into account maybe how much someone's eating, how much energy they're expending from exercise and just lifestyle. And so, if that is too low, the calories left over, the energy left over, then we could run into a lot of challenges, just like, something just like fatigue. But on the more serious end, it could be something just like hormonal adaptations, a lack of, not just energy, but an inability to focus, so many other things. And I think one area where I tend to focus on a lot is with very active individuals. So men and women, if we aren't getting enough, and this is a very, I would almost say a simple kind of thought is like, you don't eat enough, you're not going to be able to perform well. And so for my runners or for my athletes that are, very active in, their HIIT workouts or they're training for certain things like, high rocks, if you're familiar with that, it's becoming a lot more popular now. But people are training for that in October. They're training for the New York City
I don't know what
Marathon.
That is. What is high rocks? Sorry,
High Rocks,
interrupting. I need to know.
No. I think high rocks came out like just before like the whole pandemic. What was that? 2019 is when it was, but it's basically, I wish I had a better definition of it, but it's a high performance competition where, people are competing against themselves, but in the end against other people as well. So it's around the world, world championships. I think we're in Las Vegas this past year, but the, 2019 people that, won it were like, they were sent to Germany. And so the training facility that I work at, Tone House over in the city, we had some people who won, were sent to Germany for, that competition, but it's, it's different competitions, different like strength and, competitions just like, wall balls or rowing, ski erg, all those type of things. Then it's a quarter-mile run in between each event. So it's grueling. And so, but it's a test of feats, a test of strength. It's a test of, mental focus for a lot of people too. So, but I love working with those type of people, people that, I definitely work with like the weekend warriors, or just like the people who are just like I'll call it the average gym goer right now. But, I work with people who are very driven, right? In the city, I know we work very close to each other. But people who are, they're CEOs, they're C-suite individuals that are running businesses. They're running parts of these cities in the world. And I love working with them because they're driven and they want to see results. And I want to give that to them. And the reason why they aren't seeing the results is because they're likely, afraid of doing something, from a food standpoint. They are likely over restricting because of food fears or things that they've learned in the past, and it's holding them back. It's holding them back from a competition, just like I mentioned, but it's holding them back from maybe being 100% in the office, right? In the boardroom, but it's holding them back too from just, maybe a body composition, or just feeling good, right? And that can lead to other things, just like when we start to have GI distress, like IBS, like there's so many things that we're going to start to see from somebody who is not allowing themselves to get the type of energy that they actually need. And so, a lot of people that I work with are searching for lower body fat, like more muscle, and they want a body composition that they've dreamt of, whether it's a six pack, whether it's just being stronger and like seeing more muscles. Like, I'm not going to tell them no, but I am going to tell them maybe what's practical for what their life is right now. I'm going to kind of walk them through what it's going to take, and we're going to get there. But all I want them to do is not to have questions about, am I doing something wrong? Is there anything else I have to do? No, you're doing exactly what you need to do right now. You just maybe need to be more patient and like work with your body, give yourself grace and that, and those kind of respects. I don't know if I had gone off topic.
That was great. That was great. Yeah. Patience. Let's speak about patience, because I don't think people really understand how long real change takes.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So, just to bring it back to, energy availability and underfeeding somebody's body. I'm working with, again, men and women, but a lot of men, aren't really asking for help. And a lot of men are just keeping themselves in a really challenging position, because they are feeding themselves in a way that isn't supporting something like muscle maintenance. They're not supporting themselves in a way that's going to get them to where they want to go. And so one thing that stems from a lot of this, I definitely saw this in college athletes more when I was working at NYU, but we would see what used to be called the female athlete triad a lot, right? We'd see something where females, we would see, bone injury, basically. We'd see under eating with eating disorders, eating disorder mentality in there. And we'd also see, other type of factors, just like we'd see in blood work, that, there are issues with somebody's body. And we have to put together, along with, the athletic team, like a plan that's going to get that athlete back to health, because that's number one. We don't care about them competing at that point. We want to take care of them. So take them out of sport, whatever we're going to do for whatever amount of time that we need to support them. What we didn't see a lot of the time was that, something like that female athlete triad, we would still see symptoms similar to it in men. And, we would want to be aware of what's actually going on. And so, you can look into some of the research on this, but the female athlete triad has basically turned into, now it's been redefined as basically red S, relative energy deficiency in sport. Because the one thing it was missing was the inclusion of men, right? Female athlete triad, definitely excluding men there. Right. But we are finding that, and it's still pretty much in its infancy, even though this has been redefined since about 2014. But relative energy deficiency in men in sport specifically is just looking at, other type of challenges that are going to come up from lack of immunity or decreased immunity. We could definitely see more injuries in there. And one thing in particular with men is that we can start to see certain things like low testosterone, right? Which is going to affect so many different things. And that is when a man finally comes to someone like myself and says, like, okay, look, I was having an issue with just not seeing results and I was feeling low energy, but like now I'm kind of finding that, like, I'm extremely irritable. I am having, maybe it's hair loss, maybe it's like all these other things that are going to come up. And all of a sudden we look at things and I say, okay, well, who are you as an individual? Okay. They're a very successful person in the office, but you know what? They're training like 8, 9, 10, like times a week. And it's like, you are training now more than most athletes that I've worked with, right? You are now outpacing, an NFL player that is working out, maybe daily, but if you look at their workouts, like they're not going to be doing it at the same intensity that you are, right? The place that I end up working at, I work through is like, these are intense workouts. It is 60 minutes of high intensity work on your body, and doing 2-a-days, 3 days a week, and then doing, just at least one workout, the other ones, you're putting your body through incredible stress. And if you're not feeding yourself appropriately, you're going to get to the point where your body is not going to adapt and you're going to start to lose yourself. And so that's what I want to do. And I want to educate those individuals mostly about how we can feed appropriately. Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we have, people chasing the body composition results that they want instead of performance goals. And, they're, usually food fads or diet fads or just food fears are usually what's holding them back, just restricting carbohydrate, restricting calories in general. People following a very strict vegan diet, which is totally fine if you're doing it right. But if it's overly strict and not supporting you, it's not going to work.
Right. So like any form of diet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's, I think,
so how did someone begin to like improve that in the recovery process of that? Like, what would you suggest if it comes from a performance standpoint or even from like a food fear standpoint? What are some of the tips that you give specifically to men? Because I feel like they're, like you said before, less likely to reach out for help. And the other thing I wanted to just make a comment about is I think in the male community, it's very common to have like the shredding season, the bulking phases. And I think people like their disordered eating is easily hid behind those phases. What do you think about that?
It's a good question, because I do end up coaching people through periods of maybe strength and power, and then periods of, however you want to define it, going into a body fat loss phase, which I really want to make sure, I don't think it's wrong in terms of what it is as much as how we go about doing it and how we've now as individuals have redefined it. Because really a bulking period is not just, binge eating until you build all the muscle you think you're going to end up building. How much muscle are you really going to build? Not that much. Building muscle is really hard. And then, what does a quote unquote cutting season look like? It's probably not as much of a deficit as we really should be in. And how much body fat do you expect to lose during that time and what's actually healthy? So, I don't think it's wrong to go through some of those periods as much as it is important to make sure that you're defining what they really are and then what your body is capable of. Because if you are, basing it off of what you've seen or what you've heard on social media, it's likely, incorrect, I'd say, right? Because it's someone who has now completely sensationalized what they saw in 2 months, right? But, looking at something like muscle gain, like you're only going to end up gaining, depending on like where you've started with your lifting, right? Into a muscle build kind of period, you're only going to end up building maybe about 1 pound per month at most. Likely less than that for a lot of people that have already been lifting, right? There's diminishing returns depending on how long you've been lifting. Then also looking at body fat loss. Like if you're going to think you're going to end up losing, an extreme amount of weight, or I'm going to lose 10% body fat in, the next 2 months to get ready for summer, you're going to be wrong. And then you're going to put yourself in an extremely uncomfortable position, and you're likely going to end
hormones.
Exactly. Right. So again, I don't think that I'm speaking about my world where I see these people more, but it's more about proper periodization of your training and your eating. And if you're looking to put on muscle and then go through some of those phases, I think you really should end up working with someone, which I think comes to, men not reaching out for help, not knowing what to do, continuing to do what they've either like heard or just extrapolated on their own from social media or magazines if people still read those. So it's something here where, know what you want, go ask for help, and then do it in an appropriate, healthful way.
Yeah. Definitely. I second that.
So, I think what you had asked before about like, how do people go about doing this? I will tell you where I found the most helpful thing for people. And, I always want to walk people through education, application, and then accountability. And so I think a lot of people will benefit from getting educated. I do teach based on energy needs. So, okay, what are you eating right now? Let's break that down. Okay, I'm going to estimate you're eating on average kind of about this right now versus, what your body may require based on everything you're telling me. You have a really big gap right now in terms of just energy needs. And so what do we do there? And let's look at certain things like our macronutrients in terms of, how much protein maybe somebody needs. So the education aspect is I'm going to start with energy needs. I'm then going to move into a macronutrient education because we do need to make sure that, men are getting enough protein, women too, but you've asked about men. So are we definitely getting enough? All right. Are we getting enough protein? Some men are getting like upwards of 2 times or 3 times the amount of protein that they actually need. And so why don't we kind of bring that down and then also see if we can kind of bring more beneficial food in to help with performance, overall health, your mental clarity, all that kind of stuff too. So I think that education is kind of a huge thing, but the bigger thing is defining those calories and defining those macronutrients in terms of your lifestyle. So, if we've figured out that you may need X amount of calories, X amount of energy. What does that look like in terms of meals in your day? Does this mean that you're going to end up eating 2 meals in a day? Probably not, because those are really large meals. And I'll tell you, you just told me that you're working at a computer, not really even focusing on your food. If you end up eating that much all at once, you're probably not going to feel good the rest of the day, right? So let's break this down, right? Let's look at certain things around what performance and, health for muscle and all that kind of stuff is going to work with. So let's now look at defining those calories in terms of timing of meals. Let's look at, what, where can we get some of those? So breaking it down now into, what those meals are going to look like for those individuals throughout their day, and then kind of get into pre-workout, post-workout and all that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what I think a lot of people start with is they'll start with supplements, and then they'll worry about and then they want to know about meal timing, and then they want to know about macronutrients, and then they want to know about calories. I feel like most people's mindset, it's trying to do it the opposite of what you're saying right now, which I support what you're saying right now, by the way, but just to help the people that are but what can I do right now? Or what is helping me and what's not? I think I have to ask about supplements because I just feel like that's where people's heads are. So what supplements would men benefit from taking, and which would they probably are just wasting their money?
Yeah, I have a very quick and simple answer for you, but not before I just make sure that we do let people know. Yes, we should, before you get to supplements, calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, timing of meals. If you want to talk about supplementation, make sure those things are taken care of first. And then before I give you this very specific answer, I'm then going to make sure that you understand that we do want to look for supplements that are third-party tested for safety, for purity, making sure that we know that what we're taking and putting in our body is just not, the efficacy isn't just there, but safety. So just make sure before anyone ever talks about that we really know how to place this answer. But if I'm going to work with any, and again, I work with very active individuals. And so, if I'm going to just get down to it, I'm going to say caffeine, creatine, and nitrates. Those are my 3 supplements that I'm going to really rule out if one of my clients, one of my athletes might end up needing. Caffeine, because of the performance benefit of it and making sure that we're not just taking too much. Also creatine for the benefits of overall performance and recovery. And now this amazing, research coming out on just overall brain health and just cognitive function. My gosh, I always tell people, I wouldn't be surprised in 3 to 5 years if people are being prescribed creatine from their doctors. That's my statement. That's no one else talking. It's just me saying.
I'll give you the credit if it happens.
No, not that. I just want to make sure it's other.
That it's not actually happening. But you are predicting it, and I believe in your prediction. I do believe that it's beneficial for anyone. I put it in my coffee every morning.
Yeah, it should. And then the last one there just being nitrates, right? So basically these vasodilators that are going to end up helping, more or less push more blood and therefore oxygen through our body, into our brain, into our muscles, knowing when to take that and the right kind of, sources to get that from, I think is really good. Are there other benefits there, like a multivitamin for coverage, focusing specifically on vitamin D, getting magnesium in there? Are we going to put protein, powders in there as a supplement too? Yeah, all those kind of things in there. But that's also where you can definitely reach out. And I think what I see from men a lot of the time is that they're basically focusing on eating however they want to, overdoing protein. Not saying that you don't, a lot of people need more protein than they think.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but protein that's like wrapped with like lots of fat. So it's and then like not getting enough carbs, I feel like, because they're so focused on like protein. So there's like so much like, that it's like, there's like an imbalance. It's like, yes, you're getting lots of protein, but you're also getting lots of fat and you're not getting any carbohydrates.
Yeah. Like, for sure.
Or nutrients, like micronutrients.
It's like, I'm glad you're protein focused, but is there anything else that maybe we can also, understand?
Yeah.
And I think the big things in terms of supplements, I say caffeine, but I'm also not talking about 1,000 milligrams of caffeine all coming from green tea extracts, right? Because, the upper levels of those can be toxic to our liver. And so, just because you took, rapid fuel fire, whatever it is, right? In terms of your pre-workout, just because like one scoop worked really well one day doesn't mean that 7 scoops need to come in, for your next workout, which happens so often. So, you just want to make sure that we're putting things in perspective for a lot of these people.
Well, but I think that's the bigger message, which is it's just because something's good for you, that doesn't mean you go extra hard on it. Like, doesn't mean more is better. More is not always better. Right. Like, so like, just because, so caffeine is great for performance goals, but not, like, just like anything, like the damage is in the dose. So too much, not enough, like it's all about balance, guys. So just because something is, broccoli is really nutritious, but if you had lots of broccoli and you didn't have anything else, you'd be pooping every day and bloated and farting and like, like obviously like it's not, you'd still be missing out on other nutrients. But so I think that's a really good point. I do want to go back to nitrates because I would love for you to kind of explain, is it best like before a workout, what foods contain nitrates, and are there supplements like specifically that just, because I actually don't even know this. I feel like there's some in pre-workouts, but normally I think of like beet juice and so I would love for you to like speak to, are there actual supplements of nitrates? I don't even know that answer.
Yeah, of course. There is, we usually use Beet Elite with our athletes. Beet Elite is basically a beetroot powder, and that's really where nitrates are coming from. Most of the time we have beetroots, a lot of our leafy greens. And so like when a dietitian tells you to eat your fiber, it's not just because we want you to poop well, it's because we do want to make sure that you're getting things that do support other areas of your body. So the nitrates in a lot of our vegetables and fruits can definitely support, blood flow, like reduce blood pressure, but it's going to improve athletic performance by allowing you to just use oxygen a little bit more efficiently, deliver it to your body a little bit more efficiently too. And so you can end up eating beets. You can end up drinking beets, but just put this in perspective for a second. Think about taking beets and juicing 16 ounces of beets. That is a lot of beet juice. And I will say it's not the amount of it, it's the mess that it creates when you start juicing beets is how I end up thinking about it.
And also, I'm not going to lie, guys, don't judge me. I spent I think it was $10 on a beet juice, maybe 15. I'm not kidding. It was ridiculous. Whatever it was like a 16-ounce bottle of beet juice. And it just happened to be something. It was like right across the street from where I was doing my workout. And I was like, oh, how perfect. And I was on vacation. I'm like, whatever, I'm going to get, I'm pretty positive it was $15. Like, I'm pretty positive it was $15. And I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever purchased.
No,
but also but the point being, like, it can get, so I hear you. I definitely feel like probably like the Beet Elite is probably like for a container is probably like, I don't know, maybe double that. But either way, it'll last a lot longer than 1 minute.
Yeah, definitely. I recently, we were walking by like a little like juice place with my daughter, and she's like, oh, can we go in there? Because it looked really cool from the outside. And I was like, oh yeah, you want to have a smoothie? And she was like, yeah, like we have like these little smoothies at home. But she was like, yeah, maybe I'll try it. And we get in there and she just decided, she's like, I just want pineapple juice. And I was like, okay, let's just do pineapple juice. And like they gave her one. It was like $8 for just a little cup of pineapple juice. I was like, okay, so we're not going to do that again.
Like it's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. So like, yeah, you can do it, whatever. But I totally hear you.
So basically you can either drink 16 ounces of beet juice, which it's most beneficial to take like 60 minutes to 30 minutes before any type of activity. But that Beet Elite, and I don't have any affiliation with Beet Elite, but it's just a powder. You just take a little tiny scoop of it, you put it in 8 ounces of water, and you drink just before your event, your workout. And it's really beneficial for more of your endurance-based events, but it's, for a HIIT workout, it can definitely be really beneficial. I know that same company, it's called Human, but they sell Super Beet, I believe was what it is, which is just like a little bit less potent of that product. And people take it for blood pressure, right? So it's
right.
pretty good. Yeah.
That's great. Oh, awesome. This has been such a great episode. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before you wrap up and let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me over on Instagram and TikTok at foodisfuelnyc.com. Same website as well. And just starting up my new podcast after recreating and rebranding. After my recent co-host had an amazing opportunity placed in his lap. And I think placed in his lap, I think that he worked hard for it. So just kind of getting my own podcast up. It's the Fuel You podcast on iTunes and Spotify. So come on over there as we talk about all things nutrition and binge eating and performance and overall health. So
I love it.
Come see us there.
Amazing. Ryan, thank you so much for being here. Guys, make sure you give Ryan a follow on Instagram. And if you enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot of it, share it on your story, tag me and tag Ryan, and let us know your biggest takeaway. If you're not subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. All right, that's it from us today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.